Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. Our core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Dr. Jennifer Heisz. Dr. Jennifer Heisz is an expert in brain health. She is Associate Professor in the Department of Kinesiology at McMaster University. It is a ranked top 25 in the world and directs the NeuroFit Lab, which has attracted nearly $100 million to support her research program on the effects of exercise for brain health. Dr. Heisz received her PhD in cognitive neuroscience and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in brain health and aging at the Rotman Research Institute at Baycrest Hospital in Toronto. Dr. Heisz research examines the effect of physical activity on brain function to promote mental health and cognition in young adults, older adults, and individuals with Alzheimer's disease. Many honors and awards recognize Dr. Heisz for her outstanding contribution to research, including the Early Researcher Award from the Government of Ontario and the Petro-Canada Young Innovator Award. Dr. Heisz, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today, and I'm really intrigued by this subject.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here.
So I'm curious. I mean, you have this journey, all this training in neuroscience, and then all of a sudden you kind of head in the direction of exercise. I mean, what kind of made you move in that direction?
Yeah, it's definitely not the normal path. And in my PhD, I was studying neuroscience, and really the research question I was interested in is how the brain represents who we are, like as people and our memories. But around that same time, I started to experience some feelings of anxiety, and I knew something wasn't right with my own brain. So I sought some help from the doctor, and they prescribed an antidepressant, which I was kind of reluctant to take. And so on a whim, I borrowed my friend's rusty old road bike, and I found that those bike rides were what it was, soothed my mind, quieted my mind, and it really sparked a shift in my research towards exercise. So I blame the old rusty road bike for the shift.
Yeah, sometimes we need need some of those things. It's fascinating how those small little events in life just kind of create huge changes in our trajectory and where we go.
Absolutely, and the profound effect of those bike rides on my mind, they healed my mind, and I was so convinced I wanted to learn more, and so that's why I shifted my research to study the effects of exercise on the brain, and the results are so fascinating.
That's incredible. So you just come out with a book, Move the Body, Heal the Mind. I mean, obviously, it is it's a kind of compilation of your research both in the brain and neuroscience and also exercise. So why did you write this book, and why do you feel that this is unique? I mean, how is it different than everything else that we see out there?
Yeah, so the book is really, I think it's very special. I mean, this is, has been my life work summated in the pages, and I think there's three parts of this book that really make it unique. So first of all, I am a researcher who's very active in this area and feature original research from my lab, but also my favorite studies. So it's really strongly evidence-based, but I do have a very natural skill of science communication, so I tell the research in a way that's a story, and I relate it to people by creating these personas or these characters out of the data so that people can relate it to their own life, rather than it just being sort of like dry, boring science. So that's one part that I think is really special. A second part is that it is my own personal journey. Like I mentioned, I used exercise to heal my own mind, so I have this personal experience with it. And as a backbone of the book, I interweave the science with my story of, training for this triathlon, a sport that I never thought I would ever compete in or perform. It was really outside of my capability. And so I thought it would be fun to track my progress in this new sport and the effects on my own brain, like a guinea pig in my own, research study of life. And so I tell that story in the book along with the research. And then finally, the third, I think, really special piece of the book is that each chapter ends with a specific evidence-based or science-based workout that I've designed. It really takes all the research I presented in the chapter and gives people a how-to apply it to their own life. So it gives them a week programming that includes both aerobic and resistance exercises and other ways to tailor the program to meet the reader's needs. So I think a combination of all those three things really make it special, and so I'm excited. I can't wait for the book to be released into the world.
Yeah, and it was fascinating reading the book, and I agree with you fully. I mean, when you have that, like you're saying, you're pointing out the connection between the brain and movement, but then to be able to have a prescription, it's almost like a prescription in the book. You're dealing with anxiety, you're dealing with depression or PTSD or pain, and then to be able to see, so this is my issue, and now I have a prescription of movement, of specific exercises that I can do in order to be able to shift how I feel emotionally and mentally, and also, physically, because obviously how we feel emotionally and mentally impacts our physical being as well.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly the intention, was to give these prescriptions and to start seeing movement as medicine, and it can have a profoundly powerful effect on the brain. And so I really go into the details of actually how it's working, so that in a way, hopefully, it will legitimize movement or exercise as a form of medicine that actually impacts the neurochemical structure of the brain in a really profound way.
That's incredible. And so instead, we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, but instead of just jumping onto pharmaceuticals, then, which obviously, and they may or may not work. It's been a lot of kind of question whether the antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication really are that beneficial. We can now use something that obviously is number one, completely harmless, but in addition to be completely harmless, it benefits us in so many other ways at the same time that adds benefit to how it heals our brain and mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the benefits of pharmaceuticals, as you mentioned, they do really benefit some people, and I don't want to ever take that away. But for 1 in 3 people who take antidepressants, they don't work. They don't help to relieve their mood. And for those people especially, but for everybody who's suffering from a mental illness, exercise is the medicine the brain needs, either as an add-on to their existing therapy or as the therapy itself. And so I really try to make that point in the book and back it up with science.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Jennifer Heisz. She's the author of Move the Body, Heal the Mind. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dr. Jennifer Heisz. She is the author of Move the Body, Heal the Mind. She is an expert in brain health. So one of the things, obviously, I mean, when we start talking about exercise, I mean, it is one of those things that everyone, as a New Year resolution, to say, I'm going to start exercising and get fit, and it lasts for maybe a month if we're lucky, maybe a month and a half if we're really lucky. So why do you feel that the brain really works so hard? I mean, it almost seems like we're swimming upstreams just to be able to do something that is supposedly so healthy for us. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a cruel thing about the brain, and I think a lot of people take for granted how difficult it is to exercise and to get started with a new exercise program. And so if you are one of those people who set a New Year's resolution and found it difficult to stick with it, you're not alone. And I think that's a really important message. And it's not your fault. It's actually, we can blame the brain because the brain makes us lazy. It wants to conserve energy, and this is a relic from our evolutionary past when, we had to expend a ton of energy just to find food. And so the brain is wired up to conserve energy, and it sees voluntary exercise as an extravagant expense that it wants you to avoid. So it will go to great lengths to talk you out of exercising, which can be it can derail your best intentions to exercise.
Yeah, and good. So now we have an excuse. I feel better now. So it's not our fault.
Well, not an excuse per se, but there's no need for shame or guilt if you're not sticking with it. There is this reason why it's hard. I mean, it's worthwhile to pursue it still, but it will be hard.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, obviously, we live in a different type of world than we evolved in as a human being. Right now we have access to so much food, so that is not becoming. We're not needing to conserve calories per se. We have an excess of calories, so we are living in a world that's so opposite from how our bodies, how they were built for. So what can we do then to kind of shift that, to kind of work against our brain and maybe even have our brain work with us? I mean, are there certain things that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, there are many different ways to sort of trick the brain or hijack this, this lazy brain into moving more. And one of my go-tos is just planning it ahead in your calendar. So marking off your exercise appointment and holding it to the same high regard you hold all of your appointments. And in that calendar, meeting with exercise and include the details about what you will do, when you're going to do it, where you'll do it, and with whom. And this really just sets up a plan. So you're planning ahead. And then when your brain says, your lazy brain protests, do you even have time to exercise? You can say, yeah, it's right there in my calendar. I blocked it up. Or if it says, exercising is hard. Do you even have the energy to do it today? You can say, oh yeah, I got the plan right there and it doesn't look that hard. So you really have to sort of set yourself up for these, this internal struggle that will happen. And planning ahead in a calendar is really helpful. Another just easy trick that a lot of people do anyways is listening to their favorite music. Music or doing anything that we find pleasurable causes the release of dopamine in the brain. And when we pair something pleasurable like listening to music with exercise, then it starts to, it's contagious. The pleasure becomes contagious, where the pleasure you get from music starts to carry over to that with exercise, and it makes it more rewarding as an experience.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, it's almost like you then have to, like you're saying, you put in your calendar and then create like a meeting agenda, which becomes your exercise program. So you have that meeting agenda, and then also recognize that you're going to have to sell whatever it is that you are doing during that meeting. So you got to prepare yourself for the possible arguments that's going against you, so that you can meet them appropriately. So I love those points that you're making.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, with the brain, and once you kind of get over this exercise hurdle, and one thing that you're mentioning in your book is also the intensity of the exercise and how important that is to some of us, we want to get fit quickly, so we hit it hard immediately and think that is the best way, but obviously that doesn't seem to be very sustainable. So what is a good strategy as we're then initiating exercise and kind of so that it is sustainable and that it is benefiting our brain?
Yeah, the principle of slow and steady is what you need to follow here. Going out too hard, too fast will probably lead to injury, and then you won't be able to move in the way that you want to move. So I always advise slow and steady, and there's sort of this sweet spot where you want to aim for that's like comfortably challenging for you. And this is so personal, so it all depends on how much you've been moving lately. I mean, some people are just starting, and they'll be starting at a much lower level than somebody who has been regularly active for their life. And I think sort of two things to keep in mind when starting back at an exercise program. The first thing is, your goal should be about feeling good, So the beautiful thing about that as a goal is that after every single workout that you do, no matter the intensity, you will feel good. This is like a proven thing that exercise will make you feel good, and you feel it immediately after one workout. And so that's a great incentive, right? You don't have to wait months to lose the weight or months to get the muscles, but immediately you will feel better. And so I think if the shift in mindset is, I am working out for my health and well-being, and I'll get a benefit after every workout, I think that can be really a good sense of motivation for somebody.
And should you add then also just a kind of a mindset strategy where you are using affirmations or reinforcing certain kind of thoughts around exercise to make it even better and more effective?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if affirmations work for you, I know a lot of people really benefit from affirmations. Definitely reinforcing the positive association you have with exercise. When I move my body, I'm strengthening my body and my mind. If whatever is critical to you, I can do my work more productively. I am in a better mood. And these reinforcing things will help motivate you to come back to exercise. One really cool thing about the research on exercise and sort of mindset is it doesn't have to be overly positive. And for some people, adopting like a positive mindset can be really challenging and not authentic. And so the thing I really like about the research is it just has to be, paying attention to the moment, being in the body, enjoying the movement of the body, and just these simple shifts in attention or focus are enough to help you really enjoy the experience more.
Great. So let's take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Jennifer Heisz. She is the author of Move the Body, Heal the Mind, Overcome Anxiety, Depression, and Dementia, and Improve Focus, Creativity, and Sleep. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Jennifer Heisz. She is the director of NeuroFit Lab at McMaster University, and she's also the author of Move the Body, Heal the Mind. So let's talk a little bit about some of the kind of emotional issues that people are dealing with, and also how exercise play a role in it. So one of the things, I mean, obviously we live in a little bit more of a stressful world these last couple of years, and I would say that we've done for a while. So a lot of people are dealing with anxiety. What is, I mean, as a neuroscientist, in your mind, what is anxiety?
Yeah, I think at the crux of it, anxiety is the brain's response to a stressor. It's the emotional response to a stressor. And that stressor can be both real or imaginary. And it creates a fearful reaction. So in response to that stressor, there's a fearful reaction that, in the case of anxiety disorders, is disproportional and over-exaggerated to the situation. And this is where it becomes problematic. So in the type of anxiety we feel from time to time, that can be kind of actually beneficial, believe it or not, because it helps alert the mind and focus us on the problem at hand, which can be really helpful at resolving that problem. But it's these cases when the fear becomes disproportional and over-exaggerated and can be to something that is not even a real true threat. Nonetheless, it causes us to feel intense worry, apprehension, and fear that is difficult to carry out our daily life.
And so, kind of neurochemically, what happens in the brain with anxiety? Is there? I know that I'm a naturopathic doctor, so then people dealing with anxiety, then I think, well, let's give them a little bit more GABA. That can be helpful. What are there kind of changes that takes place in the brain with anxiety?
Yeah, so the main brain structure involved in anxiety is the amygdala. And the amygdala is our fear center in the brain. It helps us process fearful emotions. But when we become anxious or overly anxious, the amygdala is hyperactive. So it really is firing its responses. It's essentially lighting up anytime it detects even a subtle threat or worry, even if that's just a thought that you've had rather than like a real event. And so the amygdala is it's overreacting. And what happens is the amygdala, when it reacts, it sends an immediate shock wave through the body, through the stress system. And so you'll feel your heart racing and your breathing will be difficult, and you might be sweating, and all those feelings that you associate with fear or with anxiety. And it's the amygdala that has this direct line to the stress system, which is why it has such a powerful impact on both the body and the mind.
And can't that even just these emotions like the fear and anxiety, can't that trigger reactions within the body, to create pain in areas, even though the tissue in itself is perfectly fine, but then all of a sudden we have a pain?
Yeah, so the amygdala is part of the neuromatrix of pain. So the way that pain is represented in the brain is across various different regions, and we call those networks. And so this network of pain, the neuromatrix of pain, the amygdala is part of that. And so what that means is that it does interface with structures that can cause pain in the body. It can actually reach down back into the body and turn up our sensitivity to pain. So things that may not have been painful before may feel more painful. And so it sort of exaggerates this pain. This is the reason why, when we're sad, things feel more painful, or if we think someone's intentionally hurt us, it hurts more. And this is also why things like heartbreak, are associated with aches in the chest, it's this emotional core of the neuromatrix of pain that's sending those pain waves into the body from the brain.
And so while we're dealing with all of this, because like I mentioned, there's a lot of people, and as you're aware of, that feel uncertainty, and there's a certain level of anxiety that comes along with that. So bringing exercise in, how can that help while you're dealing with all these things?
Mm-hmm. So exercise, one of the neurochemicals it produces is called neuropeptide Y, or NPY, and this is a resiliency factor that essentially calms the amygdala down. So neuropeptide Y is released, this is the good news, by light exercise. So going out for a daily walk would be enough to infuse the brain with neuropeptide Y, NPY, to calm down the overly anxious amygdala and help reset the system so that you're not feeling overly anxious. That's one way that exercise can help. And I think that's a really great starting point for a lot of people. Another way that exercise can help is actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. So a lot of people with anxiety also have anxiety sensitivity, which is this fear of the feelings of anxiety. So, when the heart races, you feel like you're having a heart attack, or when you can't catch your breath, you think you're going to suffocate, or when your mind can't focus, you think you're losing your mind. And these over-exaggerated feelings and thoughts associated with the body sensations of anxiety prevent a lot of people from exercising, actually, because they're afraid of experiencing those symptoms. But it's those people who would really benefit the most from not just the NPY that's released from exercise, but also adding in just quick bursts. And I'm talking a few seconds of a burst, even just maybe, a quick walk, climb the stairs, something to get the heart rate elevated. Because when we experience the symptoms of anxiety, so the heart racing and the labored breathing, in a safe space, like when you're exercising or engaging in activity that you like, then we learn to not fear those symptoms as much as we used to. And so slowly we become exposed to them, and then exercise in a way becomes our exposure therapy. So we're gradually exposing ourselves to the thing we fear so that over time it loses its power over us.
Yeah, because it doesn't look as big and scary anymore, and becomes more of a known factor rather than, the unknown is always the scariest.
The unknown is scary, and the amygdala hates the unknown. So, especially in this time, because there's so much uncertainty, I think that's why a lot of people are feeling overly anxious, is because all the things that we could predict and count on have been really taken away, and that uncertainty is difficult to deal with, and the amygdala, as a reaction, becomes overactive.
Yeah, and then we have, aren't there other chemicals as well that get secreted? Like you have the endorphins that people talk a lot about, and the cannabinoids. Do they play a role in it as well?
Absolutely. So the endorphins are essentially the body's and the brain's stronger than morphine painkiller. So it's this natural production of painkiller that is produced by exercise. So what this chemical does in the brain is actually binds to the emotional core of the pain matrix and calms it down. So there's less fear, there's less anxiety, and that helps you feel good. Endocannabinoids, which are essentially the body's natural production of cannabis, these neurochemicals bind directly to the reward system of the brain, and they produce dopamine and make you feel that sense of pleasure and feel good which helps reduce and relieve stress and anxiety.
And this system, the endocannabinoid system, I mean, that's something that is so ancient. I mean, we even find it in cockroaches, right? I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah, the reward system is preserved across a lot of species. So, we have learned a lot from animal models that about how this works, which has been we've been really fortunate to have.
Well, I mean, it's really like we're talking about the anxiety, fear, and then the correlation with pain. So then to bring in exercise, knowing that it will then relieve pain, it also will impact anxiety, and that will also support, that kind of feeling good, that dopamine rush that, sometimes triggers or that can be a big reason for addictions. And let's talk a little bit about that after the break. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Jennifer Heisz. She is the author of Move the Body, Heal the Mind. She's also director of NeuroFit Lab over at McMaster University. So addiction is a big issue, like opiates, people dealing with, all kind of alcohol. And one of the bigger things, the reason it's so addictive is that kind of that dopamine rush that it creates. So I would assume exercise would be really helpful in addiction as well.
Yeah, it is. It's really helpful. So unfortunately, the drugs of abuse and alcohol all work by increasing dopamine in the reward center of the brain, which is why it makes you feel good, at least temporarily, right? But the problem is that drugs of abuse and alcohol, they increase dopamine to supernatural levels that the brain was never designed to deal with. And so this is not something that the brain likes. And what it does is it changes its structure to compensate for it. So it takes away some of its receptors so that you need more and more of the drug to feel good. It takes away the pleasure that each instance gets, each time you try the drug, use the drug, it takes away the pleasure you get from it. The problem, and this helps kind of regulate dopamine systems within the brain so that there's not too much pleasure, because it doesn't want too much pleasure. It disrupts its delicate balance. So maybe I'm so sorry. I'm trying to explain this very simply, and it's tricky. So if we think about this drugs being this supernatural stimulus of dopamine that essentially causes the reward system to sort of lock down and close up. So the reward system strips away its receptors, so it's harder for you to feel pleasure, not just from the drug, but from life in general. And this is why, a lot of addicts have a difficult time enjoying life or getting back to enjoying the simple things of life, because it really is only now this supernatural stimulus of dopamine from the drug that can stimulate the brain enough to give them pleasure. So exercise is really beneficial because it essentially helps restore and rebalance the reward system after drug addiction. So the good news is that drugs, although they essentially decimate the reward system, the reward system can be rebuilt, and exercise can help rebuild it faster. So when the drug is taken away and the individual becomes sober, the brain slowly starts to rebuilds its receptors so that you feel pleasure again from the simple things in life. But that can take a long time, and exercise helps to work with the natural healing of the body to speed things up.
Yeah. So I mean, and you talked in your book about studies or where they had a group that were getting off, and I can't remember if it was meth or whatever addictive substance it was, and they saw that the people that relapsed were the ones that were not exercising. I mean, the ones that were able to kind of to stay away from the drug, they were the ones that introduced exercise into what they were doing.
Yeah. And the reason is because exercise also increases dopamine, but it doesn't do so in such a supernatural level. And so the exercise gives the brain the dopamine that it needs to thrive. And so it essentially, you can think of it as replacing the dopamine that's lost after you stop using drugs. But it does so much more than that because it helps replenish the reward system so that pleasure is felt more readily, and you can get back to feeling good in life. So it's super powerful. It also, in addition to increasing dopamine, it also helps like crush cravings, So this is really important, especially during the first few months of sobriety. It helps crush cravings. Even just one single bout of exercise can crush cravings for up to 30 minutes afterwards. And so this really provides, a really great outlet and safety net and support system for someone who is recovering from addiction. And not surprisingly, a lot of homegrown support networks are in place in many communities where people who have been addicted to substances found exercise to be extremely beneficial in their recovery and then started run clubs for recovering addicts, which have really helped provide long-lasting support. And I would say that it really is the long-lasting support. It's a lifetime that you have to have exercise in your life to really heal the brain of addiction.
And some, I know we're kind of getting close to an end, but I mean, you've found so many cool kind of research findings in your lab, working with obviously mental illness, and we've discussed that quite a bit, but also things like dementia and focus, being able to kind of focus and learn better.
Yeah, we have some really cool research out of the lab. So, especially in today's day where a lot of us are sitting most of the day, we found that just short exercise breaks are enough to improve your focus, increase your productivity, enhance your memory. And the idea is that when we sit for a prolonged period of time, the brain loses blood flow. And so we need to restore that blood flow, and movement breaks, short, frequent movement breaks are the best way to do that. And then, the research we've done with dementia has been really groundbreaking. One of my favorite findings is that, physical inactivity contributes to dementia risk as much as genetics. So we often think of dementia as being sort of a genetic disorder, but physical inactivity can contribute to dementia risk as much as genetics. And so I like to say, you can't change your genes, but you can change your lifestyle. And it gives us a lot of hope as we get older to take control of our health in a way that could protect us from getting these scary diseases like dementia.
So as we're getting older, I mean, we should really then push for being out there, moving ourselves. And do we need to do kind of a high intensity for this, or is even just kind of taking a walk, the low intensity beneficial for your brain?
Well, I like to think every step counts. Some is better than none. And even just a walk a day is enough to keep the brain healthy. But to optimize brain health, we do really need to pick up the pace, at least intermittently. And so high intensity sounds very intimidating, so I like to just call it interval walking. This is like, I can get behind interval walking. And what is interval walking? Well, essentially it's like picking up the pace between light posts, just intermittently, or throwing in a few hills on your daily walk. And the idea is that if you incorporate short bursts of higher intensity exercise, this produces more lactate. The lactate can accumulate, and it is lactate. We often think of lactate as sort of that, we associate it with that burning sensation in the muscles we want to get rid of. And for a long time, scientists thought this was like a useless byproduct of exercise. But it turns out that lactate may be one of the most important promoters of neuroplasticity. It helps produce new blood vessels to ward off vascular dementia and helps produce new brain cells in the hippocampus to ward off Alzheimer's disease.
So it's almost like we want to strive for that kind of lactate burn in your muscles, because of the impact it has on your brain.
Just a little bit. I don't want to scare you away from it. But if you can incorporate a little bit, it will go a long way.
I love how you're very cautious to not use scary words. We'll use interval instead of high intensity. That's great. Well, Dr. Heisz, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show, and your research is really fascinating, and to be able to kind of recognize, we all know that exercise is good, but then to use it more as like I said, as a medicine and know what it does and how it can benefit me, it drives it home a little bit more why I need to do it. And that's, when the brain is trying to argue yourself out of it, you can then use these arguments to win in the debate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That is it for today. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. And remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it.